Good afternoon. My name is Jim Conlan and welcome to the latest edition of our RCB Radio Sports Show, live at 92.5 and 94.8 FM and online at www.rcb.ie. This week is a special feature. It's our look ahead to the Senior Club Football Championship for 2021. As we know, Kilrush Brechin are the reigning champions, having won the Jack Daly in 2020. And this year is the format. We have three groups. We've one group of 5 and 2 groups of 4. How it works out in terms of who progresses is that the 3 teams in Group A, that has the 5-team group, they will all progress to the quarterfinals. Then the top 2 teams in Group B progress to the quarterfinals. The third team in Group B will play the third team in Group C for the last remaining spot in the group finals, while the 2 teams in Group C will play, top 2 teams in Group C will make the quarterfinals as well. The bottom teams in Group C and Group B are in the relegation playoffs, and the two bottom teams in Group A, the 5-team group, are also in the relegations playoffs. So there'll be one match each for those 2 teams, with 2 teams being relegated this year to the Intermediate Championship. I'm delighted tonight to be joined by our guest, our regular RCB analyst, Nicholas Rynne, renowned Clare sports journalist, Seamus Hayes. Also to be joined, obviously, by a renowned, staunch West Clare Gael in terms of David O'Shea, a Kilrush Shamrocks pioneer sort of figure back in West Clare, and then Joe Kelly, obviously, from Clare. I'm going to start with Group A. Group A, we have the defending champions Kilrush Brechin. We have the previous champions Milltown Malway. And when you look at the champions in the last decade, we have another champion in here as well in Cratloe. We have the finalists not so long ago who competed for the Jack Daly Ennis-Diamond. And then we have a proud traditional group called Club Clare. Obviously, the group of death. If people were looking at the 3 groups at the start and you were saying to yourself, who do you see in the quarterfinals, you would probably say there's a good chance you would name Kilrush Brechin, Milltown, Cratloe and Ennis-Diamond. One of them won't get through. We know Clare's tradition in terms of the senior championship. They're always knocking on that quarterfinal doorstep as well. So 2 big hitters will go out of the championship early on. And Seamus, if I can come to you first, Kilrush Brechin. No Dermot Coughlin this year for the championship. Out through a long-term injury. Shane Hickey out as well for a long-term injury. Some of the older players have stepped aside in terms of way down their sort of involvement. We have Aidan McCarthy heavily involved in the hurlers as well. Is Kilrush Brechin as strong a squad as what the squad was last year?
Well, I suppose it's hard to know at this stage, Jim. A couple of weeks ago, they were struggling to field a team in the QC Cup. A lot of injuries, and I suppose a lot of the more senior players had taken their time about returning to training, to protect themselves, I suppose, and to get into shape over a shorter space of time. But I think there was a very significant game last weekend in the QC Cup. They fielded a nearer to full strength team than we've seen for a while there's still a number of players to come into it. They beat hitherto unbeaten St. Brechin's, and I think that sent out a message that Kilrush Brechin will not be easily shifted from the position of county champions, and are going to make a big battle to hold on to the Jack Daly. And I suppose we saw that too when their management team was confirmed. Aidan Maloney remains on as manager. He has led them to a few titles. David Russell, the former Kilkee and Clare star, has joined him this year. And then Mick Bohan, has come on board. A huge signing, if you like. And I think it's going to take a significant effort to shift him from the position that they hold at the moment of champions.
And David, in terms of Kilrush Brechin, I was up there recently and I was covering underage game and they were training on afterwards, and I just saw the numbers. They had 35 lads training, but the involvement and the coup of Mick Bohan, he was sort of ran the whole sort of show from that sort of training session. he was the main dog. He was doing all the online coaching, on-field sort of coaching for the Kilmurray Bricken players as well. So he's coming down back to Clare. He almost feels like maybe Mick wants to be able to prove himself on the club scene as well. And I suppose coming into Kilmurray Bricken, he sort of knows the tradition there in terms of big game environments as well. So do you imagine that sort of new freshness that Bohan's going to bring to Kilmurray Bricken in terms of the training is going to get that extra 10 or 15% out of him?
Yeah, it probably will, Jim. You know, and David Russell is in there with him as well. And I suppose maybe Aidan Maloney thought, you know, he's a cute operator. Remember, he thought that, you know, this a fresh voice in there would reinvigorate their season again. You know, they've as you mentioned there, there's a few injuries there. McCaughlin is injured, you know, and Shane Hickey is injured, and Michael Hogan has stepped aside as well. But I mean, when you look down through the team that they put out against St. Brecken's, and the few lads that still have to return, you know, they still have the nucleus of a very strong squad. And you know, Aidan Maloney has a history of bringing teams that were kind of were performing underwhelmingly in league, and he always got a tune out of them when it came to championship. You know, I'm thinking of, you know, Clare and ourselves in Kilkee, and you know, he was always able to get a tune out of a team when it came to championship. And I am sure that this championship will be no different. And I certainly think that they'll have a big say in it. You know, there's 3 teams to come out of the group, and I'd be thinking that the way that Kilmurray will operate is that they will probably pinpoint maybe probably 2 games. You know, they've you know, if they win 2 games or maybe a third game, they'll probably come out of the group and they'll fancy themselves against anyone else that comes out on the other side. You know, I doubt now they'll be going gung ho in all those in all those whatever 4 or 5 games to come out of that group, and you know, they'll be picking the teams that they think they can get wins out of. You know.
And Nicholas, if I can come to you, in terms of Keelan Sexton, we know he's a marquee player, and he always, for Kilmurray Bricken, he sort of delivers. But I'm just sort of wondering this year, with the lack of Dermot Coughlin, Michael Hogan stepping away, in terms of forwards, we know Andrew Shannon at wing forwards is a bit of a workhorse. We know that the sort of other sort of players, Michael O'Dwyer as well, a workhorse type of player. If you hold Keelan, do you hold the sort of scoring threat from play for Kilmurray Bricken? Because when you look at Kilmurray Bricken, if Keelan is held to maybe under 6 or 7 points, is there anyone else there that can chip in with 4 or 5 points from play, do you think?
Yeah, I think there is, but Keelan is a big player for Kilmurray, and he's going to have to really step up now with the 2 legend names stepping away, like Michael Hogan and Dermot Coughlin. He's really going to be the senior player in there in the forwards now. But I don't see him not delivering, especially at club level. Like, he's an inter-county footballer. He's a great free taker. He's well able to, you know, at club level, his pace is a bit off maybe for inter-county, but at club level, he certainly is. He's a great marksman. Like, he's a great go-to men to get the scores. And you know, I don't know about, you know, he's a serious player, like, you know, and a serious club player now, and he's maturing all the time, like, and you know, coming into the age he's at now, like, he should be coming to the peak of his career, really, you know. And he's had an awful lot of experience at inter-county as well, so he's a major asset, like, to Kilmurray Bricken. And you know, the guys, the likes of Bohan, will get the best out of him, I feel, as well. Like, Bohan is a serious man to come into any team, and he'll be able to fine tune if that needs to be done. Keelan, like, you know, he's just a serious player, but they won't be just dependent on Keelan. I mean, they have young players coming through. You said it there, 30 players back at the pitch training. You know, and they'll come up with 1 or 2 this year too, I'm sure, from during the rail ranks, who will come in and put their hands up for a jersey as well.
And I suppose, Seamus, if I can bring you on to the usurped champions, Milltown Malbay, and I suppose with Milltown last year was seen as a disaster, really, and obviously they felt they needed to act quickly on it, and We see the two previous senior winning managers back together in one management, Michael Neelan and David O'Brien. We also see the return of Darragh McDonough. We see the return of Kieran Malone to the setup as well. Obviously, when you look probably at Milltown last year, Cormac Murray, Owen Cleary, two scoring forwards, young Keane Mahoney chipping in. But now you're adding Darragh McDonough to the scoring ranks. You're adding Kieran Malone to the scoring ranks as well. Milltown obviously are a different machine this year, judging by that.
Yeah, they certainly, I'd say, are determined to bounce back and win back the title. You know, they've won the QC Cup for this year last week. They beat all comers along the way, bar one draw. Had a big score difference at the end. The first game, obviously, in the championship is going to be huge. They're playing Kilmurray. That's the first round. So it's absolutely a huge opener. And neither side will give an inch in that one. Neither side will want to lose that one, because whoever wins that one, you'd expect would be on their way, you know, to making the knockout stage out of that group with 3 teams coming out. But certainly, Milltown mean business. I say that's the bottom line, and there's nothing surer than, like, you know, with Kieran Malone back. Shawnee Malone had a tough year last year with a lot of injuries. Looks to be okay this year coming through. Conor Cleary obviously is in great physical shape. Hasn't played any football yet, but he's been a key to everything they've done over the last couple of years. And Owen Cleary is probably having the form of his life at the moment. You know, we saw that with the county. He scored 2-7 last week in their win over Clondigad against your own group or your own team. So they certainly have lots of talent, and I'm really looking forward to that first round game. I think it'll certainly be maybe one of the games in the round. And Kilmurray were hurt, you know, by the heavy defeat that Milltown inflicted on them in the opening round of the QC Cup, and they're not going to be saying that they were shocked a lot of players which they were on the day. I suppose they essentially had their second string out, but they will want to redress that. So that's going to be a cracker of a tie. But in answer to your question, Milltown mean business, make no doubt about that this year.
And David, in terms of Milltown, I suppose people will look at it and their forward ranking has improved. But I suppose in terms of the defence, I suppose some of those lads are getting on. They'll still be backboned by Gordon, Kelly. They still will have Tato back there, Inda O'Gorman as such. But is it the same sort of, I'd say, back six going to the well again for Milltown in terms of the young players seem to be coming in terms of their forward sort of options? But if they suffer 1 or 2 injuries to their defence, would it have a big bearing on them?
I don't think it will, Jim. I think if you're looking through the squads of all the teams that are taking part in the senior championship, Milltown probably have the strongest squad, and you could even see it in their QC Cup matches. You know, they were bringing on 2 and 3 lads that you were kind of saying to yourself, Jesus, they're first team material. Whereas with other teams in the QC Cup, didn't have that luxury. You know, you had teams that were struggling to put 17 and 18 players together. But Milltown seemed to be bringing lads off the bench in those QC Cup matches that were first teamers. And I think of all the teams especially in that group, I think they have the strongest squad. And I can probably see them going through that group unbeaten and probably using a good part of that squad as well. You know, you've Keane Mahoney now that played with the Clare 20s there. I mean, he has a couple of years now of you know, strength and conditioning and inter-county training under his belt. You know, he hadn't really been making their team, so you'd imagine now he'll be putting his hand up. And you know, you mentioned there, you know, Cormac Murray and the Clearys, and you know, Darragh McDonough and Kieran Malone back, which are 2 huge boosts. Like this, it's like getting 2 new players back. They're going to be huge from your players in central positions. And Kieran Malone is the kind of player that gets them up the field. You know, he has the pace to break lines, and he can occupy a couple of defenders that'll free up the scores in Murray and Cleary inside in. So he's a huge player at this level anyway.
And I suppose, Nicholas, in terms of Milltown, we know what they're capable of. We know they can sort of kick sort of fantastic scores in terms of big sort of tallies as well. But if they were to suffer a setback against Kilmurray Abricken in the opening round with sort of big hitters like Cracklow and Innistyman in that group. Could that make them sort of vulnerable in terms of a reaction, in terms of if they've sort of went to the well with Kilmurray Abricken, that someone could, someone like Cracklow or Innistyman that have the capability could spring a shock in the second round, and then there are two back-to-back losses, and then obviously it's panic stations?
Yeah, well, obviously in any group, and especially this group, the group of death as they're calling it, you know, if you don't win your first game, it doesn't matter what group you're in, you're going to be in the back foot, like, and you're going to really, you know, you don't have a second chance then, like, you're going to be under pressure then. But especially in this group with the serious teams that's in it, they'll really, you know, as Seamus alluded to there, this is going to be one of the games of the championship, I think, because neither Kilmurray or Milton want to lose ground in that first round. It should be a cracker, and two serious teams, two big hitters, two of the biggest hitters in the county at the moment are those two teams. So either one of them won't want to a defeat in their opening game, because as you rightly say, you come up against Cracklow then and a serious team as well. Any team, in fact, in that group, you're going to be under pressure. And, you know, losing a game, and especially a local derby like that, it could take because a lot will go into it, and it can take an awful lot out of you as well. And then you're heading on to the next round, you know, with the heads down a small bit for the management to get them up again, you know. But they are serious players, you know, in Milton. You know, it's very hard. It'll take a fair effort for Kilmurray to beat him, I think, the way you know, the sound as we're hearing from Milton this year, like, you know, so it'll be a cracker of a game. But you know, both teams will want to win that first round, that's for certain, you know, and the pressure is off a bit then, because that is a serious pressure group, you know, to say, you know, there's no room for complacency at all.
Seamus, if I can bring you on to Cracklow, and I suppose Cracklow, in terms of the last few years, in terms of football, they've been so close, but you felt watching them, they've been so far away, yet at the same time from winning it. Now, one thing that was probably labelled at Cracklow, we all know about the marquee sort of forwards Cracklow have. We know Dermot Ryan's ability. But in terms of having an out-and-out man marker in defence, someone that could tackle an Owen Cleary, someone that could tackle a Keelan Sexton. I mean, the acquisition of Kevin Hartnett to Cracklow this year, a real sort of inter-county defender, a man marker. If Kevin's fit, obviously that adds serious significance to that Cracklow defence. It strengthens it maybe by 50 or 60%.
Yeah, certainly it's a huge signing for them, if you like, because I think it also provides them with the other option in that Michael Brennan, I would expect, will move out to midfield or move out to the half-back line and possibly to midfield. And we all saw what he could do last year, you know, when he attacked from the full-back position. You know, he had a hand in a number of crucial scores coming forward, and if they can release him from the full-back line to play further outfield, I think it'll give them a great scoring power, if you like, you know, up front, and I think that's going to be a big asset to them. I know there's a question mark, obviously, over if Kevin Carter would be fully fit. Podge Collins, there's a question mark at the moment as to whether or not he'll be fit. He has a serious leg injury since the Clare Kerry game, and you know, he may be out for a while. It's not fully clear yet, waiting for results of scans, I think, or so I understand. You know, they'll need all those. And I suppose the other question, the other thing that has been labelled at Cracklow over the last couple of years is with practically the same set of players playing senior hurling and senior football, that, you know, trying to keep both going, has that taken from their performances in the last couple of years? We've all seen them get to the concluding stages of both championships and just come up short. And there are a lot of people who would argue that the reason for that is that, you know, it has taken too much out of them, I suppose, going week on, hurling football, week on, week off, and no break from that point of view. So that's another question, but they certainly will be fancied by most to be in the shake-up and to be in the hunt come the knockout stage of the championship.
David, in terms of Cracklow, one thing that's also struck me as well now, we always said Cracklow, the number of players that they had in inter-county football and hurling squads in terms of their involvement. That's not the case really anymore. I was just looking at it there. They've Dermot Ryan with the hurlers, and then they obviously have the two Collinses with the football, and then I was trying to look at in terms of any other sort of Cracklow involvement in terms of senior inter-county teams, and there doesn't seem to be. Cathal McInerney, Conor McGrath, Liam Markham. I mean, the workload some of those boys were through the last few years when they were involved in senior inter-counties and picked up injuries. Do we want to probably have a lot fresher Conor McGrath this year, a lot fresher Cathal McInerney, a lot fresher Liam Markham in the boys? So these boys probably won't have the sort of wear and tear coming into this championship that they would have had in previous years.
Yeah, that's true, Jim. Actually, I was thinking the same point today. It's probably the first year, as you said, that they haven't had as many players in either inter-county squad. And I suppose injury has taken its toll on some of the players you mentioned there. Cathal McInerney and Conor McGrath have had their issues with injuries with regard to having to pull aside from inter-county action. So, but yeah, you would imagine that they should have a fresher outfit this year. And as Seamus mentioned there, Kevin Hartnett is a great addition to them. I mean, he gives them options in any of the six back positions, and it frees Michael Brennan and maybe Dermot Ryan and Liam Markham then to go elsewhere, because Liam Markham is fairly adept, but he can play in the half forward line as well as playing in the half back line. But it's still the conundrum. The annual conundrum you have with Cracklow is they're depending on how far they get into hurling, and they have an incredibly hard group in the football, and they have that extra game, so they're playing week on week, and it'll depend on how they manage the workload of them players, and they'll probably get to the final stages of both competitions, but there's where the crux of the problems could lie in that they're going to get caught somewhere along the line. It was different 8 or 9 years ago when they were young players and didn't have as many injuries. But there's a lot of miles in the clock in a lot of those Cracklow players, and there a lot of them are susceptible to injuries as well. So time will tell now with hard ground and fine weather now.
And I suppose, Nicholas, in terms of Cracklow as well, one thing that's probably labelled at Cracklow, if you look at the benches of other teams in this group, you look at even in a Steinman's bench, the options that they have there, Kilmurray or Bricken started bench, Milltown started bench. You look at Cracklow's bench and you probably say after 17 players, go down 1 to 17, you're probably sort of struggling after that. And with the likes of Billy Connors not being involved in recent years as well, is the Cracklow panel strong enough in terms of, we know how good the starting 15 is, but is the Cracklow panel strong enough to compete for a Jack Daly?
Yeah, that's a very good point, Jim, and I suppose they certainly don't have the bench that Kilmurray and Milltown would have, and probably go to Clare, but they're benched in. After our first 15, their bench seems to be, for me anyway, is hurlers being turned into footballers, and and that makes up your bench. All the Cracklow players, a lot of them, they're first time hurlers, and then they're adapting to football, and that's a hard thing to do, and a lot of them are fine footballers, and footballers are number one game. But when you're playing in a dual club, when you go down into the subs bench, then you're getting lads from the hurling panel maybe to make up the numbers when they don't come from a traditional football club, which they don't really, and that's probably where they have problems as well. Like when you're looking at their panel, and there's some fine athletes, but they are not natural footballers. If you know what I mean, I'm not knocking them at that, but that's the problem. And it's the lads have said it there, and Joe has said it. It's to adapt from 1 week to the other. The different paces of the game, they're two completely different games, hurling and football, and adapting from 1 week to the next week. And the training is slightly different as well. I would imagine, football is, as I said, is a different game from hurling. So that's a hard act. You have two different managers then, with two, maybe, you know, they will have their, you know, serious managers who have their own approach, and I'm sure they cooperate with each other. I'm not saying that, but it's very hard to prepare a team who are playing a different sport maybe next week, and there's where I think a lot of Pretlo's problems are, as well as obviously the wear and tear and all those dates that were named there. You know, they all have serious patch, all those, they're serious mileage up on the clock though, week on week on. We wondered their years when they were really going, you know, when they went to the Munster final there in football, how they could keep it going, and they're still at it. The same players basically are still at it. So to answer your question, they will struggle, you know, when it goes 18, 17, 18, you know, when you want to get, because it's a 20-man game now, as we all know. So I think you've hit the nail on the head there. They will struggle a little bit for a strong panel.
Seamus, if I can bring you to Innistimon, and we all thought when Innistimon, when they got to the county final, that Innistimon had really arrived, all the underage success, really good, strong management with Burdo and Ger Quinlan in charge at the time as well. And then they obviously had the second season conundrum where everything sort of went wrong, and Burdo stepped aside, Ger Quinlan stepped aside. And in fairness, they haven't really gotten nowhere near that level since Innistimon. It seems to be gradually falling back into the sort of pack as well. In terms of this year, is there any sort of signs to say that the Innistimon we saw a few years ago under Ger Quinlan, that's going to resurface again?
Yeah, well, Odin O'Dwyer is in there this year, an experienced man that has done it all, seen it all, you know, and I think that's going to be a big plus for them. As you said, they have they've promised most and failed to deliver, I suppose, if you like, over the last 5 or 6 years. They have a huge amount of young talent. Like, they have a string of underage titles, a mile long, more than any other club in modern times. But to translate that to the senior setup is difficult. It's not easy, and you know, I suppose they have a number of dual players as well involved in all their teams. You know, and getting them to be ready and to be at the right pace of the game, you know, week in, week out is difficult as well. So this year they started well. They were unbeaten going into the last round of the QC Cup last week, in the running for the title, and then they were held to a draw by Kildysart. And from what I'm hearing, you know, were lucky enough to pull a draw out of that game. So, but their chance of winning it went on that day. So there are questions. They have questions that they need to answer. There's no doubting in the world that they have the talent. I'd say one of their biggest difficulties is getting their best 15 on the field at the one time. You know, they're a club that have maybe 30 players of equal talent, and you put any 2 or 3 different members of the club would pick 2 or 3 different lineouts, and on paper they look equally strong. But it's to get the right 15 or the right 20 on the day. I think that's the test that's facing them, and they have a strong management team. As I say, Noel Crowe is manager, Donna Fall is there, Odin O'Dwyer is in there with them. You know, this is the year that everybody will really be looking at them to see, can they make a mark and can they get through to the playoffs. That'll be the first step, I think. If they can get out of the group and get to the playoffs, then it's a new challenge again.
David, let's talk about these Innistimon underage sort of players for a moment. And maybe there's a myth about these sort of players. I know they've won an awful lot of underage titles, but I'm just looking through it there, and I noticed some of the real strong players, apart from the Rans, take maybe Killian Ruan, Owen Ruan, Brendy Ruan out of it. The strong players, Conor Hegarty, Keelan Guylers, the Whites, Keith Whites, all these sort of players, they're all Aina Kilnamona sort of base sort of players, hurling sort of players. So in terms of, while they're so strong and really good in terms of minor age, do the sort of focus then sort of switches them for them in terms of adult football? Is that a case where the Aina Kilnamona sort of contingent they disappear on Innistimon come 20 or 21, or their focus swings solely more on the hurling in terms of, because when you look at maybe the Innistimon teams that have won all the titles, they're probably backboned all the way up the spine by Aina Kilnamona lads.
Yeah, that's true, Jim. Just looking at Innistyme in the last couple of years, I think I think they have two problems. I think the first problem is the one you mentioned there in your question, is the dual player issue that they have, and the fact that their dual players are coming from another club, so they wouldn't have 100% loyalty towards Innistyme. And the second thing being that hurling is obviously their first game. And the second problem that I see with Innistyme is they have no real, inter-county forward, inter-county senior forward that's your go-to man. They don't have an Owen Cleary, they don't have a Gavin Cooney or a Keelan Sexton, or, they don't have that kind of a player, or David Tuberty. They don't have that kind of a player in their forwards. And, when they reached the county final against Milltown there a few years back, they were every bit as good as Milltown were on the day, but just they didn't have that killer instinct up front. And, Owen Cleary was probably the difference between Innistyme and Milltown winning that game and Innistyme losing it. And until they have a top class inter-county forward in their ranks, I think they'll struggle to reach the top table. Look, they have produced fantastic underage players over the last 4 or 5 years. You mentioned the Wines there, and David Fitzgerald and Cathal Malone are tremendous players around the middle of the field. Great athleticism that gets them up the field, but it's just that little, that bit of class you need, to get to the final stages of competitions and to win county championships. And I think that's where they'll fall down.
And Nicholas, in terms of that forwards, we mentioned there was a few good forwards. Young Ross Doherty was a good forward, and injuries deprived him. Conor Shanahan as well, not around in the start of scene as well. So they mentioned about that inter-county forward. For so long, the shoulders rested on Joe Dowling, a sort of senior elder statesman on the big games, to come up with the scores for Innistyme. And if it does, the Innistyme team need a bit of rejigging in terms of, I know they tried it last year with putting David Fitzgerald at full forward and it didn't work out. So are Innistyme alert? Probably they seem to be alert to where the failings are.
Yeah, that's right. Joe Downing has been a big player from there for many years now, and I suppose David said it there, they haven't got the marquee forward that most other teams do have, and there's where they're falling down a good bit. Then they have, David said it there. I mean, the hurlers are from the Kilmona club, and they fancy going somewhere this year as well, as almost every year, and they'll be really focused on the hurling. So then they have to turn around, go up the road to Innistyme and refocus with another club, and that's a bit like Packler's problem, and as you said, they tried David Fitzgerald there. David Fitzgerald's an outfield player, especially in football. I think he's a big, robust man, and he needs to be out the field. And I don't think full forward really suited him. But that is their problem, is scoring forwards, and they're not too far off the mark. But that's definitely something an Olden or the Wire no better men to be in there, to try and solve that conundrum for them, and get their forwards moving and get guys in there. Joe Downing can't keep doing it. Joe's not getting any young Ryan Drury. Won't mind me saying that, but then they need more of the younger lads now who have, they've had they have a great underage success, so they need to have to pull a few of them and bring them up to pace, and there's where Aldrin and the lads are going to have to come in, forwards wins games, and you have to coach them into winning ways as well, but it's going to be tougher in this time, I think.
Seamus, I suppose the rumour mill was going rife a month ago in terms of the news, and it was all hush-hush that Sean O'Donoghue had applied for an international transfer to Clare, and he was going to be part of the Clare set-up come championship time. I don't know if that's sort of confirmed or not, but if someone of that ability came into Clare, and obviously with Pearse, Simi Hall, Gary, Thomas Downs, Jack Morrissey, is there one big game in Clare where they could spoil really a chance for someone to get out of this group? Because people are looking at Clare and they're saying, right, Clare are in a relegation sort of final as sort of such if they finish sort of the bottom of group, or if they don't get into top sort of 3. There's nothing really to sort of expecting of them. But have Clare the potential of someone like a Yank, if he was on board, to really sort of gate crash in terms of taking a big hitter out of this group?
Yeah, obviously they have, they have the ability to cause an upset, as people would see it in the group. Like they're a noted championship battlers. They're never easily beaten. And they have put together an experienced management team this year. 5 fellas who have played for the club, who are passionate about the club. Who have played with the club over the years. I don't see Sean O'Donoghue being involved this year, given the travel situation and the COVID restrictions and all the issues around that. I don't see it as being a realistic thing to happen this year. That's, maybe I'm wrong. And then you have the situation, what shape are you in comparison to the fellas you'll be going back to play with? Clare, I suppose they've had a few lean years and they have struggled a bit, but they have a lot of good young talent. Like, they have been knocking on the door in minor and under 21 titles there, kind of consistently. And there's a few of those players coming through, so they certainly have the ability to trouble other teams. By the way, on the relegation thing, as far as I know, there's only 3 teams in the relegation in football. The bottom team in each group. That's my understanding. So, now again, and I'm fairly sure that I'm right in that. But that's beside the point. All these teams will be going all out to win the opening game or 2 and get out of the relegation zone. Now, a lot of people will look at that group and they'll point the finger and say, Clare are going to find it hard to avoid being in the relegation. I don't necessarily think that's the case. Like, Clare aren't going to fear any of the teams in that group. They certainly won't fear Kilmurray or Milton, even though they are the 2 hotly fancy teams, I suppose, if you like. But, traditionally, Clare have stood up to challengers from Milton and Kilmurray, and they have a good record over them. And so they're not going to fear those teams. But the first round is the round, and everybody's going to be looking at how the games will go on. Clare face Cratloe in the first round, and I don't see them looking beyond that at this stage. And if they can, put up a good performance there, it will open the door for them to say, lads, we have a chance here now. Let's focus on the next game. And I think that, and in the group of 5, I think clubs aren't going to be looking past their next game at any stage. They're not any club that will sit down tonight and say, look, we're going to be first, second, or third. I think they're asking for trouble. I think all they can do is look at their first opponents and say, that's the game we have to focus on. And when that's over, then you can talk about the next one. So, and just to answer your question, yes, Clare can be the troubleshooters, if you like, in that group. They will feel that they're capable of, and they have shown in the past that they're capable of taking on and upsetting any of the other teams in the group, which would really open it up.
David, on Clare, in terms of the experience, I'm just looking there. Cathal Lillis, Tomas Donlan based in Dublin. I know Cathal was back there for a while as well. Declan McMahon as well. Rory Donnelly not part of. They seem to lose an awful lot of experience very, very quickly after the county final defeat in 2015 to sort of Milltown. And obviously it was brought, they went from experienced team to very, very young team all of a sudden. Is that sort of that lack in terms of the elder sort of statesmen, is that what's really why Clare are struggling at the moment? Is they're waiting for their 28, 21 and 22-year-olds to reach the 25 and 26 mark in terms of gaining that sort of physicality and terminal strength with some of those boys departing the scene?
Yeah, I suppose it is, Jim, and Clare are similar to any other club in West Clare. In the, it's very hard to try and attract players back when they move away from home, when they move to Dublin, and you can't be dependent on them to come down and keep committing to the club every year. It's a huge commitment when someone is living and working in Dublin, as is the case with a couple of the Clare lads. It's very hard for them to keep committing year on year. coming down to West Clare, and especially in the last 2 years in the predicament we're in with the pandemic and travel and whatnot. But yeah, Clare probably lucky in a sense that they did win that minor team and under 21 team that won a couple of years ago, and they are backbone in the team now. I think the problem with Clare this year is that they have so many injuries. You know, Jack Morrissey is injured. He broke a bone in his leg. Sean Brown, who was a talented minor last year, he actually broke a bone in his leg in the same match against Lissy Casey, I think, in the Gary Cup. And from what I'm hearing, Queeveen Donlan is injured as well. So I mean, for a club that's their resources are stretched, is, you know, they're going to be 3 big losses, and, you know, throw into that Shane Lillis played there last year and was very good in the senior championship, but he's on a golf scholarship in the United States, and he's obviously gone back to that again. So you know, it's going to be left to the Pierce Lillis and Michael Gary and the O'Donoghue brothers then to carry the can for Clare. Obviously, Tomas Downs, I saw him playing against us there a few weeks back now, and he seemed to be moving very well. And you know, Thomas Stanlon is still there as well. So you know, I suppose the conundrum for Clare is to where to play Michael Gary. Do you play him in the half back line where he's more comfortable, or do you play him inside in the full forward line like they did last year? So that's the conundrum for Clare. Obviously, they've Brian McNamara coming into the squad this year. He's of age now. He's 18, so he's a super athlete and a super footballer. So I'd imagine that they'll use him around the middle of the field. So I'd agree with Seamus there. I think Clare could take a scalp in this group, and, you know, they'll say to themselves, you know, if they can get a win early, you know, they might finish up inside in the quarter-final spot. But you know, their results are stretched a bit now, so they'll. But I still think they can catch someone.
Nicholas, we've heard there the inside news from David. Jack Morrissey's likelihood, ability to be involved in this championship now, given a sort of injury. Jack Morrissey obviously has been the marquee forward for Clare, taking over the mantle from Rory Donnelly. If he's out for Clare, I mean, it's a bit like looking at the Cracklow bench. Can Clare replace someone of the ability of Jack Morrissey?
Well, sure, I didn't know that he was injured, but he's got to be a huge loss. Of course he is, and you know, any club who loses a player this time of the year is going to be lost. But especially one of your marquee forwards, like it's going to be. But they'll have to replace him, and they have no other choice. That's the bottom line. Like, but you know, they've had great success in underage as well, the more than in Diamond, and they have to have players there like that will be coming along. But it's a huge blow to lose someone like that. But I think Clare like are in a position now where they have nothing to lose in this group. Everybody's expecting Kilmurray and Milltown in this Diamond to a degree as well. So the pressure is off them in that respect. And that's when they might be at their most dangerous, because there's players being named out there that would walk onto any team. Pierce Lillis being the leader of the pack there, I suppose. So I think Clare will be able to they will have a bench. They had maybe not the strongest in the world, but I think Clare will come up with one or two surprises in you know, and should be a foolish team. And I know that none of the teams there in that group will be taking them lightly for certain. It would be foolish teams that would. But Clare on any given day can come out with a team that can take down anybody, and they have done in the past. We've seen it, and you know, but injuries, you know, and I suppose you know, other teams that will probably be struggling with injuries as well. But that's a big blow, you know, to lose a player like that.
If I can move on to Group B, which contains the seeded team St. Brickens, it contains Kilrush, Shamrocks, Kilmehel, and the intermediate champions of last year, Dora Bearfield. And Seamus, start with St. Brickens there, and I suppose in terms of the depth of the St. Brickens squad, we played them there in a junior game there last week, and the amount of numbers that they had available to both junior sides was absolutely astonishing in terms of the numbers. We could barely field enough for a third team, and they look like comfortably fielding enough players for a third team as such. So St. Brickens, there seems to be a great buzz around the club, a sort of great sort of buy-in, and they certainly seem to have the numbers anyway in terms of a panel.
Yeah, I think that their progress to the concluding stages of the championship last year has created that buzz. You know, they fielded a third team this year for the first time in the club's history, a third adult team. They have no problem with numbers, as you rightly say. They could nearly field a fourth adult team. And from that point of view, and you know, they have been playing all their games, and probably the difficulty now, you know, they look to have a very lively, settled team last year. This year, they have a very lively team, but I don't know, is it settled in that there are more players putting their hands up and saying, we want to be in the team. And maybe to get the 15 or the 20 that will best provide a way forward for them might be the difficult part of it this year. They certainly have no shortage of talent. We saw that they had 4 or 5 on the county senior panel all through the winter there. They had 4 or 5 more on the county under 20 panel. You know, so it just shows that the talent is there, and they have been consistently featuring at underage level. You know, be it A or B titles, more often than not maybe B grades, but they are pushing up and pushing on. Obviously, they need to qualify out with the group this year to show that they're building on last year, and that will be the target. They will start out as favourites to qualify from that group as one of the 2 teams that them, but they're going to have a tough first round. You know, St. Joseph's Dora Bearfield won the intermediate title last year. A lot of people would have said they'll go back down again next year. I think they've shown in the league so far this year that they're a different kettle of fish. Now they're very focused on football. They have just a couple of dual players and they're managing very well between the hurling and the football. You know, in the past they might have had a lot more dual players, and it was maybe come day go day for the footballers, but that's not the case right now. They're well organised. So I think that's going to be a lively first round game. They're actually meeting in the first round, but in short, if Brickens don't qualify out of the group, to represent a setback for them.
And I suppose we know David Doney in charge of Brickens. He's such a man management. He's such a tactician that he leaves nothing to sort of chance. Every sort of team, he analyses them to the data scrutiny as such. When you have some guy like that in charge, a real sort of people sort of player, it sort of inspires you because you sort of know that he's leaving no stone unturned in terms of his preparation.
Yeah, that's true, and he surrounds himself with good people as well. You know, he has good S&C people there, and he has Declan O'Keefe in with him as well. So yeah, he surrounds himself with good people. You know, you know, one would expect that Brickens will come out of this group. You know, we all know the players they have, and I suppose the thing about Brickens is to try and manage the expectation that they have of themselves, and that their supporters have of themselves, and that people that follow football in the county have of them. And that's the next step, and that's the crucial step for them. You know, they have this is probably, you know, people would argue this is probably the most talented St. Brickens team that probably they have ever produced. So I mean, there's going to be great pressure on them. You know, they've a nice age profile across their team. You know, they're all in their mid to early 20s, and they've a couple of experienced guys thrown in there as well. So it's to manage expectation now. And you know, when they come across the Milltowns and the Kilmurrays and maybe the Aeros and whoever that they'll come across, I've no doubt they'll come out of the group, but it's after that'll be the real test of them, and you know, we'll see the colour of their money when they come out of the group.
Nicholas, we spoke about Cracklow and the acquisition of a marquee sort of defender in Kevin Hartnett. We all know the talent St. Brickens have up front. From the midfield up, it's stacked, it's loaded with talent. You could probably say in every line, the half-hour line, 10, 11, 12, all can chip in with 3 or 4 or 5 points each inside the full forward line. But do they have a man marker in defence that can tackle a David Tuberty, an Owen Cleary, a Keelan Sexton? Have they got a defender of real inter-county quality that can do? We know Alan Sweeney plays in the half-back line, but have they got a defender that can really step up to a real marquee Clare forward.
Yeah, well, that's the one man I was going to say is Alan Sweeney in his day could take out anyone, you know, and you know, for me, Brecken's last year were the most exciting team I saw, and they were well able to defend as well. And I thought they were very unlucky not to progress last year, you know, the way they played, but they played superb football, and they played really attacking football, as we know, and that's what they do. But they're well able to defend as well, and their pace in the backs, the way they can transform that ball and get it up the field, like was it kind of stood out for me last year anyway. And you know, I think they'll be well able to cope with anything that's thrown at them. They are favourites to come out of that group. They're favourites to get back into at least the semi-final as well. They'll be expecting that themselves with the panel of players they have. They have a huge pick up there, and you know, they you know, the way they took out Ennis Diamond last year, who were going fairly well at that stage. You know, it just they are really, they have a very strong panel. It's you know, we've been seeing, but the type of football that they are playing, you know, for a supporter up there in the stand to watch it, I think it's brilliant football, and I love to see that. And the team just playing that kind of football, getting that ball up the field, that pace, and then the pacey forwards they have, and they have to kick those scores. That they, you know, I give them. I think they'll be there at the business end anyway. Let alone coming out of this group, I'm expecting an awful lot from them anyway. And they for me last year, they were the team. You know, they just didn't get the look on the ice, but they didn't progress.
Seamus, you mentioned Dora Bearfield there, and you sort of mentioned that the squad that they had last year and the squad that they have this year is stronger. And I suppose that's because probably players like Darren Eagle, Fionn Kelleher, Owen Talty, they were all ineligible to play last year. They're all of age now. These guys have been in inter-county minor squads competing in Munster finals, in Clare under 20 squads as well. So when you talk about young talent coming through and breaking onto the senior scene, these guys are probably guys that would be in contention to start for Milltown, Kilmurry, Brecon, Cracklow even.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, they have a big pick in number one. You know, it's a huge parish, and they have been prominent at underage level in modern times. They've been concluding stages of a couple of minor A championships, which has been producing players, which, as you rightly say, are now fellas who are coming into their adult team. You know, they have two adult teams going. They have a junior team going as well, and you know, and they're also providing a few options for the senior squad. But you know, the thing I like about them right now is that unlike a couple of years ago when you mightn't be sure if they were going to be able to field on a given day, they're well organised. You know, they're working well with their hurling counterparts within the club. They're not as many dual players as they would have had in the past, and the dual players who are there have been well managed to give their commitment to both. You know, and they have a lot of fine players, like the Hannons they're very good at both codes, but they're fine footballers. And you say there's Conor Brannock, and there's a couple of Tynes, and you know, there's a lot of very good players there, and I fancy them to put everybody in that group, to put pressure on in that group, and I think they're going to be fighting hard to qualify from that group. I think that's their target, from what I'm hearing, that they have targeted that initially. So it's going to be interesting.
But I suppose, David, Clare is a county that is sort of, it's a small county, everything is well known. We all know about Dora Bearfield as sort of potential there. So I imagine for other teams that are in the group, it's going to come as no surprise to them in terms of the capabilities that Dora Bearfield have, especially when they're active together.
Yeah, Dora Bearfield, I saw the intermediate final last year, and the thing I found about Dora Bearfield was that they kind of stumbled upon their best team as Cardinals, the championship was going on, and even in the intermediate final itself, they probably stumbled upon their best 15 in the second half of that match. They brought on Tom McDonald, I remember, at half time in that final. I think he kicked 2 points, and he was playing for the under-20s there last week as well. So yeah, they've a lot of underage players and probably a luxury in one way, but it can be a nuisance in other ways, that they have too many players and they don't know their best 15. But in McDonald and Darragh O'Shea, they have two fine players around the middle of the field. And Seamus mentioned the Tynes and the Hannons, and these lads are good forwards too, and they're used to winning. They're coming from a culture of winning underage, and they won't fear any team, and they certainly won't fear any team in this group. So yeah, they're look at their on paper, they're probably the second favourites to come out of this group, and they'll leave bags of it to Brecken's too when they meet them.
Nicholas, in terms of Dora Bearfield, I suppose it's a young team, but it's a promising team. And I suppose in the past, Dora Bearfield have struggled. If success didn't come at adult level, players parted and went their own way. Do you think there's a different sort of mentality now being brought in Dora Bearfield, that there's more and of an identity with the club?
Yeah, they have great underage players, and they're bringing them along now, and a young team. What I'm hearing about Dora Bearfield is that they're putting in a serious effort now in both codes, in both hurling and football, and they have a serious setup out there. I mean, the setup they have out there is second to none. Dora Bearfield is a very big parish, and they have an awful lot of players, and an awful lot of young players at the moment. And there will be at least second favourites to come out, I suppose, behind Brecken's to come out of that group. But I suppose in terms of identity, Dora Bearfield, the success they had with the hurling club. So the football club is trying to, I suppose, get an identity for themselves, I suppose, certainly at senior level. And they're trying hard for a good few years now to get up there, and they have come very close. But they, as I said, the fact that they're a very big parish, the fact that they're a Jew club, they have so many young players coming through and playing both codes now. That the talent is definitely there, but having talent and being able to hone it, and have a club that can really focus on what they need to focus on, and having the right attitude going out. It's one thing at underage, but to do with it at senior level, it's a different ball game altogether. And they will be under pressure later on, I feel, but I think they will come out of that group.
Seamus, Kilrush, I suppose there was a transition there last year in terms of the championship. We all know there was no sort of relegation as sort of such. And one thing that Kilrush did was they blooded an awful lot of young players, an awful lot of senior established players for some reason or another didn't commit or stepped aside, and Kilrush used that as an opportunity to throw in a whole load of young lads against big sort of opposition as sort of such. Do you think that experiment could be of benefit to them this year?
Yeah, I think so. I think that they are stronger this year. I think they're more settled this year. They got a few players back as well. I'm not so sure if Matthew Maloney, a very key member of the squad, played much last year, but he certainly is playing this year. They have positioned Garrod O'Brien at centre back. Maybe we would have, prior to this year, we would have known him maybe just as a forward. I saw him a couple of weeks ago against my own club in the first round of the league, and he was an absolute revelation at centre back. Kicks some fantastic points from play and from frees, from all sorts of distances. So I think that's a move that has worked for them. They have brought in quite a number of young players, and they are doing well. They're improving all the way, and there's a tremendous tradition of football in Kilrush. We all know that. In the 70s they were winning 5 in a row, and they fell on lean times, maybe no more than a lot of other parishes in West Clare because of numbers, declining numbers of people moving away and living elsewhere. But there's a big effort being put in there at the moment, and their underage teams are putting in an effort as well, and it's going to pay off. It takes a few years, I suppose, just to get things right and get things settled. But Aidan Daly is in there, and in his second year in charge. He's a former Kilrush player himself, so he's passionate about Kilrush, and he's a passionate group with him. So they will have set a target of qualifying from that group. And their first round game is against Kilmahel. They've had a few great battles in recent years. Both were spent a bit of time in the intermediate championship and clashed there as well. They're both back up and deserving the senior ranks now, and neither of them will want to be in the relegation battle. So a first round win will ease that pressure. And I expect Kilrush to challenge strongly in that group.
David, I know Kilrush is your native club, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. But what I want to focus on in Kilrush is that we talk about quality young players coming through for Bearfield. The same can be labelled in terms of Kilrush for the next 1 or 2 years. I know Dylan O'Brien is there with the county minors, not eligible this year. Then you look back below that, you have the likes of Conor Finnell, who's with the county minors playing midfield. He's the year after. You're competing, Kilrush are competing in AA, at under 17A, at under 15A, right in the mix and sort of thing. So for Kilrush, they know you sort of know the talent is coming in the next 3 or 4 years. But in terms of the team's development, how critical is it for you for the next year or two to stay senior before you can start pushing up again?
Yeah, it's vital, Jim. It's vital that we try and stay up senior for the next couple of years. As you say, we've a number of talented players down the ages, and actually last year was the first year that we would have had three of our underage teams playing at A competition, and the same is true this year, as you mentioned. So we blooded. I think we had 8 debutants that played last year when we played the first round of the championship last year. And the thing about it was a lot of them, obviously, all them lads hadn't played any league football, so they have the benefit of them 2 championship matches last year, and they also have the benefit of the 4 or 5 league matches. We were happy enough with the way the league went. We won the matches we were expected to win, and Lissy Casey beat us, and Bearfield beat us. I didn't see the Bearfield game now because I was away, but Bearfield beat us and Lissy Casey beat us. But we were happy enough with the win against Clare and O'Curry's and Corrafin, and those with 4 minors that played last year, and all of them they're a year older and a year stronger, and they have more football under their belt. But the game against Kilmahel is going to be huge. Kilmahel kind of have had the Indian sign over us the last 2 times we've met. They've actually beaten us well. They beat us in the intermediate final in 17, and they beat us in the senior championship in 19. Beat us well, so they always seem to raise their game for us, and it's going to be a huge game, especially the first game. If you win that match, you're probably safe from relegation. But I mean, if you lose that match, you're under pressure. So it's like the oil championship. It's knockout for us, and it's a huge game for us.
Nicholas, in terms of this group, people will look at it and say there's a great opportunity for all the teams in this group. People look at it and say Group A is probably a group of death, and people will probably see it, and Group C is a group of death. So obviously for the likes of Kilrush, Kilmahel, Dore Bearfield, these are all the games they want to be playing, because they obviously feel on any given day that they can beat each other. So in fairness, is that a sort of a bonus in terms of this sort of group, or does it raise that expectation level that bit more?
Yeah, when you look at that group, there's no real team that you can guarantee and say they're going to top the group, and there's no team there that you're going to say, well, they're going to get relegated. Like, there's very little between any of those teams. And if you look at Kilrush, Kilrush are a proud, and they have a noble history, more than probably any other club in Clare. And in hindsight, for them going down to intermediate, for being relegated at that time, it probably galvanised them to look it probably give them the kick up the backside they needed. And I'm not sure David will appreciate that, but and now they have really come. They're bouncing back again now with a young team and a good team, and that game against Kilmahel is I wouldn't mind being that game. That'll be fair pricing in that game. But there's nothing between any of the teams in that group either. It's not the group of death like the other group would say. But likewise, it's a group that anybody anyone can top it, and anyone can be relegated out of it. So every game, and the first game for Kilrush is definitely a huge game. It'll be a huge game for Kilmahel as well, obviously. But you can put a piece of paper between any teams. It's going to be that tight, and it's going to be an interesting group, and there's no guarantees for anyone in that group. You know, we're obviously putting Brecons as the favourites to come out of it, but just there's a lot of football to be played in that group before the fight, before whoever tops it and whoever is relegated.
Seamus, the last team in this group, Kilmehel, and I suppose in terms of Kilmehel, I suppose they probably have one of the smallest squads in the senior championship, a competitive sort of squad as well. Obviously boosted by the return of Stan Lenine back this year. But in terms of Jack Brown's availability, for a club like Kilmehel, if Clare are going well in the hurling, if Jack is not available to them, it's a massive handicap, surely.
Yeah, it certainly is. You know, I suppose no club can afford to lose any player, you know, and I suppose Jack was one of a number of players from Ballyea last year who made the decision to focus on the hurling with their club, and their club went to the semi-final of the championship, at which stage Kilmehel were out of the football. So, you know, whether or not he's going to be available this year, I don't know. Obviously, Kilmehel would be delighted if he was, because he gives them another option. He's a very experienced player from his intercounty pursuits and his involvement with Ballyea, so he would be a big asset to them. You know, and Stanley Nean's return is a big boost to them. You know, and Martin O'Leary is an experienced player. They have had mixed results in the league so far, but you know, they have good young players coming through, and you know, players like Sean Crowley is one of the liveliest players in the Clare football scene at the moment, and you know, he's going to trouble any opponent. So that's a plus that they have there as well. You know, they know, as David said there, it's a huge game. It's a huge game, and those teams will know that lose the first game and you're on a bit of a back foot from that stage on, then, because you know you have one eye probably on avoiding relegation, and you have the other eye on just trying to get forward. You know, trying to avoid relegation could become the focus rather than trying to qualify for the knockout stage. So that's a huge game. Kilmehel and Kilrush in the first round. Kilmehel have had the Indian sign in recent years over Kilrush. Kilrush, I think, are better organised now than they were the last couple of years. They're more settled. They have been together for the last year or two, and that could be an asset to them. So that game is going to be interesting, and I think Nicholas is right. It's a game that a lot of people will want to see.
David, in terms of Kilmehel, and I suppose a big loss to them last year was they lost Dan Keaton to a serious injury, and Dan Keaton is a guy that operates around the middle of the park in terms of fielding ball as well. So that battle for Kilmehel in terms of the options that they have around the middle of the park, obviously if they're depleted in that sort of area, it means the ball doesn't really go into their full forward line to the danger men, O'Leary, Kieran Downs as such.
Yeah. Dan is a big player for them, and he was a big loss from last year. But you have to remember too that Kilmehel beat Clongad last year. I think you know, it was a strange match in that they kicked no wide, and I think they had about 20 or 30% possession, and they still came away and beat Clongad. I saw them against Lissy Casey last year, and you know, they were well beaten by Lissy Casey last year. But you know, the thing about Kilmehel, which is, you know, traditionally, I suppose we'll say back in maybe 25, 30 years ago, Kilmehel wouldn't have had forwards to kick the necessary scores. But you know, this current Kilmehel team have those forwards. You know, Seamus mentioned Sean Crowley and Martin O'Leary, and then you throw in Kieran Downs into that mix as well. You know, Kieran has 2 or 3 years spent now as a Clare senior, so he's you know, he's going to take serious watching, and by all accounts, he's had a good league. So you know, they have good forwards, and they are strong around the middle of the field. And you know, it's look at, I said it earlier, it's going to be a huge match, and you know, I think that'll be the deciding match as to who finishes bottom and who could possibly go forward to a quarter final.
And Nicholas, lastly on Kilmehel, we know the influence Audrey O'Dwyer had involved in sort of coaching Kilmehel for the last few years. He's gone to Innistimon as well. Do you think that sort of the what Audrey brought to the table, and obviously not being with Kilmehel anymore, that's going to sort of push Kilmehel sort of further back, because that Adrian factor was a big driving force in Kilmehel's success.
Yeah, he's got to be huge last, of course. I mean, if he's knowledge of football and outside of football as well, he's a physical, you know, he does a lot of work with getting lads fit again and well capable of doing that. But I suppose they have had the advantage of having had him there. It is a great thing, but he's going to be lost from the line for certain, you know. But in terms of their first game, I don't think that they will enjoy that it's Kilrush that they're meeting in the first round, because Kilrush have a lot to have you know, will be gunning for Kilmehel. I feel anyway that they will at this stage, and you know it is a big game for both clubs. But to answer your question, Aldrin will be lost to any club when he leave them. Like, you know, you can't buy the knowledge that he has. He's a very, you see him on the line, he's a very calm man, a very knowledgeable man, and he can read the game, and he has a lot of other expertise that he brings as well. So he certainly will be a big loss and a bit of a downer, I'd say, for Kilmehel, that he's moving on.
Seamus, the last group, and I was just looking at this group in terms of, we saw Group A, the sort of group of death, but this group is likewise the group of death. Trying to say 1, 2 and 3 in this group. You have Lissycasey, you have Erogue, Clondegad and Dumbeg. And my gut feeling is telling me that come the final game of this series, that all the 3 places will, and the 4 places in this group will be undecided on who's first, second, third and fourth, that everyone in this group on their day, if they perform, will fancy their chances of beating the other sort of team. So we might know who's coming out of this group until the final day. Maybe the other groups might be decided ahead of that time. But we're going to start off with Lissycasey. And for Lissycasey, in terms of, I know it's your own sort of club, but is there real incentive to take the next sort of step now?
The real incentive, I suppose, is to build on last year. And go a step further. You know, the club did well last year, got to the semi-final. 1 or 2 small things on that day, game could have gone in their favour, you know, beaten by the eventual winners. Kilmurray, it was tight, it was close. But I suppose the challenge for Lissycasey is to beat the likes of the Kilmurrays on days like that. You know, they have come so close on a couple of occasions now, and just have come up short in those situations. They have, you know, they have all of last year's panel available again. You know, they have gone through the league so far unbeaten. You know, but while it's an indication, you know, that they're going okay, a lot of the teams they played would have been short a few players and would also have been experimenting. So obviously their opening game is against Erogue, and that's a big game, you know, because Erogue have a lot of talent, have a lot of good young players coming through. You know, they had a big squad of players involved with the county this year, both under 20 and the senior team. So it just shows you that they have a lot of talent. Former Limerick star Shawnee Buckley is coaching Erogue this year. Lissycasey have the same management team as last year. You know, they'll need, I suppose, one thing that has helped Lissycasey this year is that Martin Daly took over the minor squad there a year and a half ago, and they were struggling at the time. 3 of the players that were in the team that he steered to the Division 2 final last year, which is yet to be played, by the way, 3 of those players have played a lot of the Division 2 league this year. You know, they're over 17, they're eligible for adult football now. So what I'm saying is that they've given more options. There's more players coming through and fighting for places on the panel. So that's a plus. But, you know, there's nothing taken for granted in that group. It's as tough a group of death as Group 1, as you mentioned at the outset. So, you know, people would say that Dumbeg are struggling at the moment. Dumbeg, to me, are never struggling when the championship comes around. You know, and we saw that last week. They picked up their first point in the Cusa Cup last week against Erogue, you know. So they're coming good as the championship fast approaches. They're getting a more settled team, and so they're going to have a say. All the teams in that group are going to have a say, and there'll be a lot at stake.
David, in terms of Lissy Casey as sort of such, and the one thing that when Lissy Casey, real good quality defenders, some real good forwards in Finucane and Aaron Griffin, but when they came up probably in the last few years against a prominent midfield, maybe a Conor Cleary, maybe a Key King for Kilmore Bricken in his pomp, maybe a Gary Brennan in his pomp, that they probably struggled to win primary possession. Do you think Lissy Casey have solved that problem in terms of fielding around the middle of the park?
Yeah, I was very impressed with Lissy Casey last year, and the thing I like about them is they have a nice balance. You know, they have some good defenders. You know, Seamus Collins is a good defender. The older of the Griffins, I can't think of his first name now. He's Ryan Griffin. He's a good defender. And, you know, I mean, Matt O'Shea and Finucane, the midfield, are two big, strong men and, you know, very mobile. And I suppose what they have up front, and I mentioned in a Steinman earlier, you know, they have a couple of marquee forwards. I mean, Aaron Griffin, we saw what Aaron Griffin has done during the National League. And, you know, we obviously, Conor Finucane is still a top-class forward. So in those two lads, they have two very good forwards, and you know, they have a couple of as Seamus mentioned there. I saw him last year now against Kilmehel. That game was on in Kilrush, and they have a good squad of players. So, but again, like what we mentioned earlier about St. Brickens, the task for them now is the next level. You know, can they get it up to the next level, and can they go beyond the semi-final, and can they rattle the big boys, the Milltowns and the Kilmurray Brickens of this world? And, you know, of course, themselves and Éire Óg have, there's a long history of a derby there. You know, they've met a lot at underage level there. This group of players against the Éire Óg group players, they've met a lot at underage, and they've met a lot at senior level as well. So it's a kind of a grudge game for both teams. So it'll be interesting to see who will come out of that.
And I suppose, Nicholas, on Lissy Casey, there's no doubt about it that they were in transition mode for the previous sort of 2 years, but they seem to be coming out of that sort of transition sort of mode, and they start to be now pushing up the ranks in terms of the senior championship.
Yeah, I think they came out of that transition last year, actually. I thought the game they brought to Cusack Bat last year, they brought a massive game, and they were very unlucky in the end not to have taken a big scalp. And then Seamus said there, when you hear that there's 3 minors coming up, trained by Martin Daly, adding to that panel as well, I think they'll be a serious team this year. And I'd expect big things of Lissy Casey. Like I'd expect them to beat Éire Óg, and it is a big game, like a derby game, as David said. But I think these teams that Lissy Casey have now are coming of age, and backbone by those minors coming up as well, adding to an already very strong panel. And they played a fantastic football last year, and they just came up just barely short, you know. And if they can just get that little extra % out of them, you know, I think they'll be there or thereabouts at the business end of the championship, let alone this group.
And I suppose, Seamus, if I can bring you on to Éire Óg, and one of the facets that I've noticed about Éire Óg, and people talk about the quality of the forwards, but you have to realise that maybe Gavin Cooney is still 21, coming 22, and maybe some of those prominent forwards in the last few years, like the likes of Evan Courtney, Davy O'Halloran, Paddy O'Malley, the real elite forwards, all sort of left the scene for Éire Óg, and it sort of left the hole where you had Cooney, the most experienced forward at 22, and then Mark McInerney, Philip Talty, all sort of kids as sort of such. Do you think maybe Éire Óg lacked the experience, the loss of Courtney, the loss of O'Malley in recent years, the loss of O'Halloran, that's the reason why Éire Óg's progress has stagnated?
But certainly losing players isn't a help to anybody, and nobody likes losing players. And you know, Evan Courtney is a fine player, and Dara Welsh, another fine player. You know, both have been in the States, and any club would feel the loss of those players. Gavin Cooney has matured immensely as a footballer in the last 12 months. He's now a seasoned campaigner, even though he's very young. Darren O'Neill is back in the Éire Óg colours after a couple of years playing club football in Dublin, and we saw what he was capable of with Clare there during the National League. Kieran Russell, I suppose, is one of the most consistent players around in club football and hurling, and you know, he's a key player for them as well. I suppose a bit of the problem is for them is getting a settled team again. You know, they have so many options, and you know, what's the best formation for them on a given day. Like you know, Aaron Fitzgerald, all these fellas, David Reedy, a fine footballer, maybe like obviously better known as a hurler, but he's a class footballer as well. So they have a lot of players. It'll be interesting to see, you know, what Shawnee Buckley brings to the scene there as the team coach this year. You know, he has been there, done that, you know, and seen it all probably, and that's going to be a big plus. And Paddy O'Malley is back with them this year and has played a couple of the league games, you know, so after a year or two away, and that's another plus for them. So they're going to be very difficult to beat in that group by any of the teams in the group. And this case, you have the task in round one. So it's going to be a key game. There's no doubt about that.
David, we all know the talent of Éire Óg, and is it the question now of consistency, back-to-back performances, back-to-back? Because Éire Óg, they can be magical, and then the next day they can sort of be clueless. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, it is. I saw them last year in the first round now when they played us in the park, and after seeing them that day, I said to myself, God, whoever beats these are going to win the championship. And as it turned out, Kilmurray Bricken beat them the next round and they ended up winning. But they're just a real enigma. And I think Kilmurray caught them for early goals in that match in Clare. And, you know, they were caught the year before then against Dunbeg with late goals. So, you know, they must be really kicking themselves over the last couple of years, you know, being caught in games like that, you know, they're expecting themselves to get a good run in the championship, and next thing they get caught in, and before they know where they're out of the championship. But, you know, they have an array of talent, and they have talent everywhere. You know, they have good defenders, they're very mobile around the middle of the field, and they have excellent forwards, and they have that what we're talking about there all this program. They have marquee forwards. You know, McInerney is a good inside forward, and Cooney is a good inside forward, and you know, that other fella Talty you mentioned as well is a good forward, and you know, between Conlan Hannafin and Aaron Fitzgerald, and you know, you'd imagine David Reedy play football with him this year. Darren O'Neill around the middle field. They've a super team. But then again, I mean, this group is similar to Group 1. You know, there's very little between the 4 teams in this group, so it's going to be a tough ask. And yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I mean, Paul Madden is I think he's 4th year now with Éire Óg, and he'll certainly be looking for consistency here now. You know, he needs to. They need to do something this year. They need to get to a semi-final or a final, and it's either you know, do it this year or this could be the finish of this Éire Óg team.
Yeah, and I suppose Nicholas, on Éire Óg, the capabilities are there, and I suppose the midfield issue was a question there. I remember Innes Diamond did a number in midfield in the previous a few years back with David Fitzgerald and Colin Monroe. They've started Darragh O'Neill back now, Kieran Russell. You imagine that's going to be the midfield part, start of pairing. There's probably not really a midfield pairing in club football in Clare that can really compare to Russell and O'Neill, especially both on song in the middle. You'd be thinking that midfield is probably in the top midfields in the county.
Absolutely, 2 big powerful men. I mean, Darren O'Neill is a huge man to have at club level in the middle of the field, and sure, Russell isn't far off him in size and power. You know, that's a powerful midfield for certain. You know, and you know, all around the pitch, Éire Óg have household names. Like, you know, some of them have made their name in hurling, albeit, but they aren't producing. You know, you're expecting this Éire Óg team to you know, to be there, like, and to win a championship, actually, with the names they have. But sometimes it just doesn't happen. It isn't happening. But with a midfield like that, you know, they have the best midfield in the county, I suppose, or arguably, you know. But and they should, you know, to be able to feed them forwards that they have. So midfield shouldn't be a problem for them anyway. But somehow they go out in big games that they're expected to win, and somehow they're not getting over the line. I don't know what it is. Maybe too much talent sometimes can be a hindrance. But you know, Darren O'Neill is a huge player. Like you know, with inter-county experience now, you know, he's going to be head and shoulders, you know, above a lot of players there in the middle of the field. And for a big man, he's very mobile as well. And two mobile midfielders. I mean, that's a great bonus going into any championship, to have those and dotted around him like they're serious players. But you are expecting a lot more from this Rogue team, whose time is running out again as well for them. And they have, you know, you have to produce it. Like, household names don't always win your championships. So there's pressure on now to produce. I can think, you know, and they are, of course, they're capable of doing that. But that's a powerhouse of midfield for certain. You know.
I suppose, Seamus, if I can bring you on to...
Jim, I have to go now. Okay, so good evening to you. Thanks a lot.
Perfect, no problem.
Okay.
Seamus, if I can bring you on to Clondigad, I suppose Clondigad in the last few years, the championship hasn't gone to plan for them. It hasn't gone well. But I suppose this year, in terms of Clondigad, there's no real expectation. There's nobody really talking about Clondigad as sort of such. Is that a good thing for Clondigad? And I suppose you have Shane Brennan back now with Clondigad playing this year. He played the last few games. Podge McMahon's back playing this year. Both obviously renowned sort of forwards. Both wouldn't have featured for Clondigad in the last 2 or 3 years. Podge with injuries, Shane being away. Is that probably going to be a big help to Clondigad this year?
Well, having players of that calibre back is certainly a big help. I wouldn't agree with you that there's no real expectation. You know, they're still classed as one of the strong teams. They have been close and knocking on the door, and maybe disappointed a couple of years ago after losing the county final that they didn't kick on maybe the following year or two. But you know, it's so hard again to do the year in, year out. And again, the dual player situation is a big issue. You know, they have a big connection with dual players between Recess and Ballyea. You know, and I suppose a key question is, you know, will Tony Kelly be available this year? He didn't play football last year. There's no questioning his ability and his value. You know, and it would certainly be a big plus to Clondigad if he's in their panel and if he's available to play in the football championship. So, you know, there are all those questions. And again, Gary Brennan has struggled a bit with injury. You know, we all know what that man is capable of. We all know that he has been one of the best footballers, not just in Clare, but in the country over the past 10, 12 years. You know, and if Gary has any bit of an issue with an injury, it would represent a blow to Clondigad hopes as well. But, you know, there's a lot of talent there. As I say, Podge McMahon being back is a big help. Killian Brennan has developed into one of the best footballers in the county in the last year or two. You know, and so there's loads of talent there, and their supporters quite rightly will be confident that they're good enough to get out of that group.
Nicholas, I suppose Clondigad's attitude towards the QC Cup was always gung-ho. I suppose the attitude probably when there was no relegation this year, it started to change as such, and we've seen different Clondigad teams every day so far in terms of the QC Cup. An awful lot of youngsters being blooded this year, being thrown in, being given their opportunities. Clondigad really have experimented big time in this QC Cup this year, which they wouldn't have done in previous years. The emphasis would have been gung-ho sort of thing. It seems to be a more relaxed attitude towards the QC Cup this year for Clondigad. Do you think that might be a help in terms of building their squad?
Oh, absolutely. When you can be relaxed like that, and when you can change your team around week on week, you know, and try out new players, try out new things. You know, they know the nucleus of their team for the championship, like, but they will certainly, and I feel they're one team to need to add new blood now at this stage. And you know, when you hear, you know, they have fantastic players in Clondigad, like, obviously, but I think they probably do need, and maybe that's what they're trying to do now, is support, so that panel who have, you know, they've been around a good while now as well. Gary Brennan, you know, as Seamus alluded, they are a big player. You need him fit on the day. You know, it's this. That's what they this time of the year, you know, your panel. It's all about your panel. It's a 20-man panel now, and you know, Clonagad will need. I think they do need to bolster their panel a bit. Anyway, you know, they've been there for a few years now, and they have been knocking on the door. And if they can come up with a few more players, and I think everyone in the championship obviously is looking to who's coming along underage and that, and who's going to step up, like, and kind of get, you know, they probably have used that time well, you know, of the league there to find out what they have and see who can come in and then settle on a team. But I think, you know, they have a lot. You know, it'll take a good team to beat Clonagad, that's for certain.
Seamus, the last team in this group, and Doonbeg, and people talking about Doonbeg's form, but Doonbeg have been doing the exact same thing as what Clonagad have been doing. I see the likes of Owen Killeen out of County Minors being thrown in there, Cathal Killeen being thrown in there, the youngsters, Luke Conway, another one that was involved in the 17s, another young Mahoney as well. So Doonbeg were probably taking the same attitude towards the Cusack Up, different team, without Tig Lillis being involved in the Clare 20s, without David Tuberty, without relegation. That the sort of mantra changed in terms of Doonbeg. It was sort of trying to build that panel and trying to get young guys experience of playing against real top teams.
Yeah, certainly, and they have used their Cusack Cup League well. You know, I think they may only have got 1 point with that draw against Air Oak last week. But they've used it well. They have, you know, experimented with players. They played, I think, in the early round, they played Pádraig Ahern in attack. They've settled in the last 2 or 3 rounds with him back in defence, where he's more at home and in the half-back line. You know, they certainly have given fellas an opportunity to show what they can do. They are a club, I suppose, that's in transition as well. You know, Colm Dillon has retired. Brian Dillon has retired. You know, and it's very hard to replace fellas of that experience. You know, they have 1 or 2 injuries, which will probably trouble them for a few weeks yet. You know, but any team playing them, you know, won't be taking anything for granted. They'll know that they're facing a stiff task, and any team that has David Tuberty, you know, you cannot give a scoring chance away inside the 45 or 50 yard line. So clubs will have to, you know, bear that in mind as well. They're not a Doonbeg team of the 70s and 80s when they were winning 3 in a row championships every second couple of years, if you like. But they're certainly are a proud club. They have a lot of good young fellas coming through whose fathers and uncles before them won championships for Doonbeg. So they won't be easily pushed aside. And I think that they're going to make life very difficult for all the teams in that group.
And Nicholas, you mentioned Doonbeg, and we saw people are probably talking down their chances. But realistically, when you look at Doonbeg and what they have delivered in terms of the senior championship, when people have promised nothing from them, they've got to county semi-finals, they've taken out Air Oaks. There would be no real people wouldn't be shocked if you saw Doonbeg coming out of this group even in 2nd spot, never alone 3rd spot.
Oh, there was absolutely no shock in that at all, because I mean the quality of football that they have in Doonbeg. I suppose where Doonbeg probably struggle is with numbers in later years, and young fellas going away and that. But the talent and as Seamus said, anyone with David, any team that has David Tuberty on, you know, he's you know, nothing needs to be said about David Tuberty. It hasn't been said already. When you see that black and white jersey coming out onto the pitch, like you know you're going to be in for a battle, and you know they know how to play football, and they know how to play football against the best of teams. You know, they're a fantastic club. They were the leading club there for years, and you don't lose that. You don't think you ever lose that. So Doonbeg will be a threat to any team for certain, and they've lost a few players, and maybe, you know, the strength and depth of your panel, it's so important now. It's a 20-man game now at club level, let alone inter-county. So that's where some teams will struggle to have that 20. Your 5 subs need to be as good as what's on the team, and there's where Doonbeg may struggle a little bit, but they're a formidable opponent in any given day, and you know.
Lads, finally, before we go and before I wrap up, I just want to touch on the relegation, because Seamus mentioned a point there about 3 teams being involved in the relegation. So I'm just wondering, Seamus, to clarify on that, is the bottom team in Group A, Group B and Group C are in the relegation, but there's 2 teams to go down, and obviously if there's 3 teams involved in the relegation process, how does that work? And could we have a case there quite easily where you have, let's say, in Steinman, who finished bottom in division Group A, and say Clondigad, who finished, let's pretend, finished bottom in Group C? Could you have a scenario where Innistyman played Clondigad and the winners relegated, the losers relegated straight away?
Yeah, as far as I know, that's the position. There'll be a draw. The first team out of the hat will get a bye. The other 2 will play. The loser goes down, and the team that wins the game will then play the team that had the bye, and the loser that goes down as the second team. As far as I know, that's the procedure.
That's the procedure.
As far as I know, that's what was in the Masters fixtures document. No, I don't have that to hand at the moment. I don't have it written. But as far as I know, that is the position. Obviously, I'll have to get that checked, but I'm 99% certain that is the position.
And Nicholas, in terms of that sort of scenarios, as in terms of such, there is a very likelihood this year, the way the groups, given the pairings of the group, we have so many big hitters in Group A, so many big hitters in Group C. Obviously, there probably will be one that won't be a surprise in terms of relegation, but there could be very well a team that might just fall on that slippery slope, and we could be shocked in terms of a big hitter going down to the Intermediate Championship this year alongside another team that was probably expected to go with them.
Oh, it's a big possibility, Jim, and you know, any of those teams are as we spoke about there this evening, are capable of producing a big shock in maybe a first round game or in a second round game. I think that's a very unfair way to decide on a team going down to relegation on just pulling a team out of a hat and saying, no, you're okay. Like, you know, I think it's a very unfair way of deciding a relegation. The relegation is as big a deal as anything, and to just put it on that 2 teams have to play off and 1 team gets a bye to stay up, if I'm reading it right,
no,
I think that's very unfair.
Yeah, the team that gets the bye will have to play the winner. Of the 2 teams that play.
Right. Okay.
The 2 teams that play first, the loser that goes down. The winner of that could still go down because sorry, I was reading. I was reading it wrong. But what surprised me was the night of the board meeting when this was debated, there was a proposal from the floor in relation to the senior hurling championship that the battle for the relegation, that the bottom team in each of the 4 groups would play off in a round robin to see what 2 go down, and that was unanimously accepted. But nobody jumped in to say the same should apply for the football. And I was surprised at that. Yeah. I thought that because that at least you'd have 4 teams playing off to all have to play each other. And at the end of the day, if you fail to get out of that, well, at least there's some right, shall we say, in that you deserve to go down then. So I thought that some of the football clubs might have moved in on that night and said it, but they didn't.
Yeah, it would be a far fairer system, I think, anyway, to do that, have a round robin and give everyone a fair chance. It's a huge thing, like, because you stay up or go down, and there's a lot right. Yeah.
Lads, time is caught up with us in terms of our Senior Championship Club preview show. I would like to thank Seamus Hayes of we're renowned Clare sports journalist. I would like to thank Nicholas Rynne, regular RCB contributor. That concludes our special preview show of the Clare Senior Football Championship. My name is Jim Conlan from RCB Radio Sport West Clare, live at 92.5 and 94.8 FM and online at www.rcb.ie. We wish all the teams competing the best of luck, and here's hoping for a great Jack Daly campaign in 2021.